Today is the day you will lose fat. Come see Dr. T at NJ Diet.
Easiest diet I've ever done. It's changed my life. Come see Dr. T.
Using blood work and DNA testing. 1-855-5NJ-DIET and NJDiet.com. Change your life in only 40 days with NJ Diet.
This is a Sid Sports Sunday, driven by Ramsey Mazda's Special Report. Giants and Jets off-season shakeups. Now, here's Sid Rosenberg.
Yes, back here on the Sid Sports Sunday podcast. If it feels like it's been a while, well, it has been a while. It's been a lot of months since we did a podcast, but this is really a historic day for football here in New York City. In fact, my morning show, the great show that we do every day on 77 WABC, the Bernie and Sid in the Morning Show, which airs 6 to 10 a.m. every day on 770 a.m. WABC. Go download the free app if you're outside New York City and listen. It's a show that really concentrates more on politics, news, current events, pop culture, and we do some sports. Not as much as Bob Raceman in the New York Daily News would like you to believe, but we do some sports. Well, I can tell you that earlier this morning, we dedicated, I would say, without exaggeration, 80% of the morning show today, outside that college scandal with Lori Loughlin, New York football, because it's just a huge day. The Jets saying hello to a mega superstar in a week where their GM, Mike McCagnon, has added an immense amount of talent, and the Giants, on the other hand, saying goodbye to a mega superstar, somebody that no one, and I mean no one in this town could have predicted would be dealt today. And that's why we're here right now telling you that this afternoon, Le'Veon Bell, who had 5 great years with the Pittsburgh Steelers, did take last year off, was angry about money, held out, did not play at all. After the year before, by the way, leading the league with 321 rush attempts, Le'Veon Bell, a New York Jet, and Odell Beckham Jr., a Cleveland Brown, after a blockbuster deal where the Giants send the wide receiver to Cleveland in exchange for a first-round pick, number 17 overall. So the Giants now the number 6 and the number 17 in the first round. A third-round pick. This seems to be a point of contention for Giant fans because the Browns have 2 third-round picks, one higher in the draft, one lower. Giants get the lower pick, number 95 overall, and a very talented young safety, Michigan product, Jabril Peppers, who, by the way, is a New Jersey kid as well. He comes to the Giants on a week when the Giants lose their starting safety, Landon Collins. He signed a $48 million deal to join the Washington Redskins. So those are the 2 major moves, which makes this an historic day for football here in New York City. We knew free agency was going to be fun, right? We knew big names all over the place. Jacksonville Jaguars, our guy Tom Coughlin, he has a new quarterback. Guy won the Super Bowl 2 years ago for the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick Foles, $88 million later, will replace Blake Bortles as a starting quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Other big names moving all over the National Football League. How about the Steelers? Talking about Le'Veon Bell going to the Jets. Antonio Brown on his way to the Oakland Raiders. Antonio Brown with numbers right there with Odell Beckham Jr. An amazing wide receiver goes to Oakland for a 3rd-round draft choice and a 5th-round draft choice. So lots of big names. C.J. Mosley, big-time linebacker, Baltimore Ravens. Another guy on his way to New York with the Jets. But New York, folks, right here where I am today, 17 floors above Madison Square Garden, 32nd Street and 7th Avenue, the heart of New York City, and quite frankly, the heart of the world. We own free agency because the 2 biggest stories are where Le'Veon Bell ends up. So we'll bring you guests for both clubs today. We'll talk about what all these moves mean for both the Jets and the Giants. We'll start with the Jets. You know, I was talking to Paul Schwartz this morning. He covers the Giants on a daily basis for the New York Post, and he said, could you imagine that on a day where the Jets get Le'Veon Bell, that is the 2nd biggest sports story in the city? And he's right, because the Giants are usually going to trump the Jets, And especially with a personality and a talent like Odell Beckham Jr., that is the number one story in the city. But certainly Le'Veon Bell coming to the Jets is a huge, huge story. Let's get right to it. Manish Mehta covers the Jets on a daily basis for the New York Daily News. He was so good earlier this morning with Bernie and I on the Bernie and Sid Show. We're bringing him back for the special Sid Sports Sunday podcast. Here he is, my good friend Manish. Good afternoon, pal. How are you?
Hey, Sid. Great to be back with you.
Oh, nice to have you back, Manish. When it comes to Jet football, you are the guy to talk to, so let's get to it. Just an amazing day here in New York for football, free agency, and trades. Le'Veon Bell, 5 years with the Steelers, puts up some very big numbers. Last year decides to sit out. I think he and his agent thought he'd be getting $15, $16, maybe upwards of $17 million a year with a new deal with a new team. And, of course, that does not happen. Instead, gets about $13 million a year with the Jets, a contract that's worth about $53, could get to $61. So when I look at the numbers and what the Jets are getting here, Manish, I'm starting to feel like Bell wanted more, and in the end, this is a win-win for McCagnon and the Jets.
Without a doubt. I think the anticipation a few months ago was that Le'Veon Bell was in line for something like about $48 million over the first 3 years, and essentially that's what he was looking for based on the conversations that I've had. And the fact that they got him for a relative bargain. I mean, let's be honest here, that the initial number is $35 million guaranteed. We'll get a better idea of the specific breakdown of that guarantee in a little bit, but let's just say on the surface, $35 million is still a lot of money, more than most running backs would get outside of the Todd Gurley, David Johnson class of player.
Well, it is, by the way, the third most guaranteed money to a running back ever. In fact, Adrian Peterson is number 2. So the two guys you just mentioned, only one made more in guaranteed money. This is third all time for Bell.
Yeah, it gets a little tricky, Sid. When you talk about guarantees, there's guarantee for injury, guarantee for skill. When the money becomes guaranteed, it's not $35 million guaranteed at signing. We'll get a better understanding of that in a bit. And really, the Jets obviously would like for him to be on this team for the duration of his contract, certainly at least for the next 3 years. He's 27, so you got to figure if he stays healthy, he can still play at a high level at ages of 27, 28, and perhaps 29. So, look, it was a good deal, as you said, a win situation for the organization. They didn't budge off what they thought was fair value. They didn't get swayed by any kind of external noise about who may or may not have also been interested. They had a good handle of the market. They knew what they felt comfortable giving him. So, in essence, the bottom line is they were aggressive, but they weren't reckless.
Our good buddy Adam Schefter over at ESPN was reporting this morning that even just yesterday, right, just hours before we found out midnight this morning that Bell is about to sign with the Jets today, but even just yesterday, Bell's agent was, quote-unquote, checking for feelers, seeing if there's any interest from other teams. Here's a guy, as you know, that during those 5 years in Pittsburgh put up numbers that were second to none. Before Barkley came along, the most dynamic running back in the National Football League. It almost seems unbelievable, Manish, that just yesterday his agent was trying to feel out teams if, in fact, they had any interest.
Yeah, it's an unusual circumstance because, as you said, look, on the field, he is one of the most dynamic dual-threat running backs that we've seen in the last decade. You can rank him any way you want with Barkley or Zeke or Gurley. He's in that class, clearly. I could have made a case a year ago that he was the best of the bunch. But he has not played football in 1 year. He has had 2 suspensions, league suspensions, and that's a concern. He has a lot of wear and tear on his body when you just look at the raw touches that he's had in his career, in excess of 1,600 touches. And there is a relatively short shelf life for running backs. So, those are all real factors, real concerns if you're interested in signing Le'Veon Bell. That being said, again, I think in the short term, a couple years, maybe 3 years, if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be very much like the player that he was in Pittsburgh.
Manish Mehta, New York Daily News. The Jets are making some big moves here the last couple of days on this special edition of Sid Sports Sunday, brought to you by our good friends at Ramsey Mazda. You look at this Jet offense now, Sam Darnold in his second year showing flashes last year that he could be a really, really good quarterback in this league. They did add the wide receiver Crowder from the Washington Redskins, a big-time offensive lineman in Osemele from the Oakland Raiders. Do you think that the Jets have done enough now with the Bell addition offensively to really help out Sam Darnold?
I do. There is one glaring hole. Ironically, it's right in the middle. It's center. They don't have somebody that I think that they need to help Sam Darnold along. But you mentioned Osemele. To me, he's a really interesting piece because he's a two-time Pro Bowler. Coming off a down year, had some injuries, but really a solid player when you talk to people around the league. It was a low-risk, high-reward type of trade in which they swapped late-round picks, assumed the remaining 2 years of his contract. Really a one-and-done potential if he doesn't work out. There's no guaranteed money in 2020. But if you look at the pieces around Darnold, Sam Darnold needed that one dynamic weapon. I think Le'Veon Bell, frankly, can do what Gurley did for Jared Goff in L.A. I think he can be that kind of help for a young quarterback. They got Chris Herndon, second-year tight end, who they're extremely high on, and, of course, Robbie Anderson, Quincy Enunwa. You mentioned Jamison Crowder, who's a really quality slot player if he can stay healthy. So clearly I believe that they have enough around Darnold to be relevant. And when I say relevant, be a playoff contender. I know it's Adam Gase's first year, but I do think that even though they came off a 4-win season, given some of these upgrades on the offensive side of the ball and some on the defensive as well, I think this team can make a legitimate playoff push. And then you have to also factor in, Sid, they've got the number 3 pick in the draft as well.
That's unbelievable. Now, you talk about Adam Gase, and I was down in Miami quite a bit the last couple of years, as you know. In fact, I came back 3 years ago, but I do know Adam's work even before he got to Miami. One of the things he could not do down in Miami was get along with some of his diva players. There's a reason why Jarvis Landry got dealt to the Dolphins, to the Cleveland Browns, where Odell Beckham is on his way. His free safety Jones had an issue with last year. Seemed like all of his big-time players down in Miami had an issue getting along with Adam Gase. So that's why when it was said to me a couple of weeks ago, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell going to the Jets, I thought it wasn't the right fit because down in Miami, Gase could not deal with some of the big-time players. Yet, Le'Veon Bell comes to the Jets based on Gase's history in Miami. Isn't that kind of odd?
Well, it depends on how you view Le'Veon Bell as a teammate, as a person in that locker room. It's interesting when a guy misses an entire season. You hear so much about what kind of person he is or isn't. And I know that there were players in the Steelers locker room that weren't too happy with him. But you have to take that with a grain of salt. And why weren't they happy with him? They weren't happy with him because he's such a tremendous player, and they figured that they needed to rely on him entering this season. So, I look at it through that prism. I talked to 2 Jet players who have been teammates of Le'Veon Bell's for the first 3 years of his career. Left tackle Kelvin Beachum, who's going to be blocking for him now, and defensive lineman Steve McClendon, who is a free agent. I don't know if he'll be back with the Jets, but both of those guys told me that, look, this guy is an extremely hard worker and an extremely good teammate. I think, from the outside looking in, it's easy to maybe, paint the guy as being a potential problem and maybe clashing with a head coach like Adam Gase. I don't know that to be true. I don't want to say that it's, not true. I just can go off of the conversations I've had with people that know Le'Veon Bell, and I don't think he is going to be a locker room issue. I don't.
Let's talk about the defensive side of the football. We'll let you run 1 or 2 questions there, Manish. Let's start with this Anthony Barr situation. Here's a guy that's been to 4 Pro Bowls for the Minnesota Vikings, a guy that played in a 4-3, but in a 3-4, the thought was, especially with new defensive coordinator Greg Williams, he could be a very good pass edge rusher. Well, it turns out, and I'm not sure if the C.J. Mosley decision had something to do with it or not, it turns out that Anthony Barr changes his mind, decides not to sign with the Jets, and takes less money, stays home, and signed with the Minnesota Vikings. So my question is very simple. What the hell happened with Anthony Barr?
Well, he's a West Coast guy, went to UCLA. My understanding from people in Minnesota is that he really liked the culture, the team. he did not necessarily want to leave the Vikings, but on Monday, Monday afternoon, that first day of the legal tampering period, the Jets did come with a really good offer. Ultimately, it was the top offer, even though he did do an about-face and go back to Minnesota. But on Monday night, the Vikings upped their offer, and at that point, the Jets were aware from Barr's camp that, hey, you know what, he's sleeping on it, he's going to think about it. So there was a strong possibility, I don't know, but certainly a real possibility that he might not come to them. So they did make a strong push for C.J. Mosley. Now, I will say this, they wanted both of those guys. It wasn't an either-or type of scenario, but they went extremely aggressive with C.J. Mosley in those wee hours of Tuesday morning, and then ultimately signed him to this blockbuster deal. He's going to be paid the most for any inside linebacker in NFL history. We'll get the details in a bit, but $17 million per year. That's significantly more than what Luke Kuechly makes. I think he's in the $12.5 million range. So, Barr was an interesting case, and probably the latest example of the fact that you don't have a deal until you sign on the dotted line. So, this legal tampering period, you can come to an agreement, a verbal agreement, handshake agreement, if you will, but ultimately it doesn't really matter until you put pen to paper. He would have been a really good piece, I can tell you that, in Greg Williams' defense. You had mentioned him being maybe an edge rusher in Greg Williams' 3-4 scheme. Look, it's Greg Williams, you can say 3-4. It's really 3-4. It's 4-3 half the time. It's so multiple, so different. But I do know that they had designs on making him more of an edge player than he had been in Minnesota. He was really an off-the-ball linebacker in Minnesota. They wanted him to do a little bit more of what he did in college on the edge at UCLA, but also use him in a number of different ways. He's such a versatile piece, kind of a Swiss Army knife, that they wanted to take advantage of that athleticism. This is a Pro Bowler in his prime, and he would have been an incredible addition. But again, I think his heart was always in Minnesota.
So on the way out, you kind of hinted at it earlier in this conversation, talking about the Jets and a playoff push. And, based upon these signings, Mosley on defense, Bell on offense, with others, McCagnon's done a very, very good job, had the most money to spend, $83 million, and it looks like at least on paper he's done a very good job here. What do you think here? We're only in March, right? But what do you think realistic expectations are before the draft inside a division with a team that won the Super Bowl again with the Patriots? I think the Jets certainly moved ahead of Miami and Buffalo based on roster talent. What do you think realistic expectations should be for the Jet band once free agency is official later on today?
Well, I think they can be a playoff contender. What does that mean? 9 wins, 10 wins? I think it would be a disappointment if they weren't a winning team. I know it's only the first year of the Adam Gase regime, but when you factor in that you've got a young quarterback who had some promising signs last year. I mean,
it's funny you say that. The year one of the Adam Gase regime, is it really that, or is it really year two of the Sam Darnold era?
Yeah, you're probably right. It's probably better characterized by saying it's the second year for Sam Darnold, and I think he's got so much talent and ability, and I just needed better pieces around him. And I don't think they're like I said, far from done, because they're going to have some holes. We'll see what ultimately happens for them at center, but his supporting cast is, I think, clearly better than it was at the end of last year, and that's why that, coupled with the fact I think will make a positive stride forward in his second season, makes me believe that they can be a 9-win team somewhere in that neighborhood. They do have some questions, though. I mentioned the center. They've got a cornerback issue. I think they need to address that moving forward. They're not bringing back their Pro Bowl kicker, Jason Myers. They didn't value him for some unknown reason. This guy was arguably their MVP if you take Jamal Adams out of the equation last year. But so there are some questions that still need to be answered. But I'm a big believer in the quarterback, and the fact that they got Le'Veon Bell to play alongside this quarterback makes me believe that, barring injury, that this team should be in the playoff conversation in 2019.
As always, a terrific job. You really are great, man. Manish Mehta, New York Daily News. Nobody knows the Jets. Nobody as well as my good friend Manish. So thank you for hopping on today's podcast, and we'll talk quite a bit throughout the season. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
You got it. Manish Mehta talking about the Jets. And now it's time to move on to the football giants, because as big as the Le'Veon Bell news was coming down just after midnight this morning, the bigger news took place about 4 hours before that when we found out the football giants traded their epic Pro Bowl, amazing, dynamic, magnificent wide receiver number 13, Odell Beckham Jr., to the Cleveland Browns. Let's get right to this, okay? I'm a diehard Giant fan. Been a Giant fan for 44 years. I did start my life off as a Jet fan, if you know this story. I got screwed over by Charlie Winter when he was the coach for the Jets in the Joe Namath era. So I switched allegiances at the age of 8. If you know the story, go buy my book. You're Wrong and You're Ugly. It's all in there. So I've been a Giant fan for 44 years. That's my team. And I love Odell Beckham Jr. on a Sunday afternoon. Believe me when I tell you, come 1 o'clock on Sunday, I want number 13 on my team. And when I talk to players on the football Giants, guys that cover the team, Odell Beckham Jr. is really liked inside that locker room. I mean, really liked. So all of the negative reports you hear about OBJ, that's not coming from his teammates. His teammates seem to like him and like him a lot and want him on their team come Sunday. But, you know, when you take a cruise, you're on a boat in Miami a week before your only playoff game against the Green Bay Packers, then you drop 4 passes in that playoff game and your team gets blown out, not so good. You know, when you're in a France hotel room with some young hottie, some prostitute on Instagram, and it looks like she's blowing lines of cocaine half naked on your Instagram account, yeah, not so good. You know, when you score a touchdown in a game against the Philadelphia Eagles and you're in the end zone and part of your celebration for a touchdown has you urinating on a football, not so good. You know, when your team is not playing well last year, and this is the one that really was a doozy, and you sit down with the ESPN and you start taking out your own teammates, the quarterback and everybody else, as if it's all their fault when you got to play with these guys every Sunday and then face the owner, Mara, after that. Not only not so good, really bad. And that's Odell. Look, Odell's a jerk-off. I can't say it any other way. He is a self-centered brat, you know, and he's a superstar. Look, he's got the looks. He's got the talent. New York City. He's going to go to Cleveland, and he's going to own it. LeBron James, he's in Los Angeles. He's gone. Kyrie Irving, he's in Boston. Francisco Lindor, maybe the best shortstop in baseball, he's not ready for that. You know, I mean, we're talking about ball players in Cleveland that are ready to be that guy. Baker Mayfield, maybe the best young quarterback in football, him and Darnold, that ain't him. Odell will go to Cleveland. He's going to be their resident superstar. See, here in New York, he had a vibe for that, right? I mean, in New York, no matter how great Odell Beckham Jr. is, you got Aaron Judge. This is a baseball town first. And if you're a superstar for the Yankees, most of the time, you're going to be the go-to guy. So Odell Beckham Jr. was a legitimate superstar here, but had to share the wealth. He will go to Cleveland. He'll be that guy. That could be good for the Cleveland Browns. It could be bad. I don't know. I know when I look at the Cleveland Brown roster, I go, holy shit. Baker Mayfield looked terrific last year. Now we'll have a whole offseason, whole training camp under his belt as the starting quarterback from week 1. On one side, you've got Jarvis Landry, who was Beckham's roommate and teammate at LSU. They're best friends. Landry, between the Miami Dolphins and last year in Cleveland, has had a great career. He's a legitimate number 1. Then you put Beckham on the other side. Then you've got Njoku, a tight end, who's about as dangerous as any tight end in football. Then how about the running backs? Nick Chubb out of Georgia. He's a monster. And as if that's not enough, the guy that spent the last 18 months piling up yardage and touchdowns and records in Kansas City, Kareem Hunt, remember him? Got suspended, kicked off the team, the violent video in the hotel in Ohio. He's on the Browns. So the Browns are going to go on offense every Sunday with Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., Njoku, Kareem Hunt, and Nick Chubb. How are you going to stop that? Good luck. And by the way, they've got a very good defense. Don't forget the Giants last week, they traded away, if not their best offensive player, that's Barkley, their next best offensive player to Cleveland with Beckham. Last week the Giants traded away arguably the best defensive player and the best pass rusher, Olivier Vernon, to Cleveland, where Cleveland already has one of the best defensive linemen and pass rushers in the National Football League. So all of a sudden now the Cleveland Browns become a legitimate Super Bowl contender overnight. So when you ask Odell Beckham Jr. the question, or you ask about him, if you think he's happy to be going to Cleveland based upon what I just told you, I think the answer is probably yes. I know Cleveland ain't New York City. I believe I know. I've been in Cleveland many, many times. You know, it's they built it up very, very nicely from where it was a decade ago. It ain't New York City. But you play professional sports to win. And right now the Cleveland Browns are significantly closer to winning a championship than the New York Football Giants. That's the bottom line. And he gets his best buddy, Jarvis Landry, and a guy that was his position coach at LSU and with the Giants, a guy by the name of Adam Henry. He's in Cleveland too. So really, it looks like it works out great for Odell Beckham Jr. But what really happened? Why would a guy that put up 3 1,300-yard seasons, a guy that last year again caught nearly 80 passes for almost 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns on a bad football team, a guy that's only in his 20s, why would that guy get traded by the New York Giants? Why would the Giants not want to go to war every Sunday with number 26 in the backfield and number 13 lined up wide? Why not? We're going to find out. Paul Schwartz covers the football Giants on a daily basis for the New York Post. He's also the author of my biography, the great book, You're Wrong and You're Ugly. And here he is right now to talk about Odell Beckham Jr. and the football Giants, my good buddy Paul Schwartz. Hey, Paul, thanks again, buddy. How are you?
Great, Sid. As always, great.
All right, good to talk to you again. This is quite a day between Bell going to the Jets and Beckham to the Giants. It's funny, you were on this morning with Bernie and I on the Bernie and Sid in the Morning Show, and you said something which you really can't argue, which is on a day where Le'Veon Bell, one of the most dynamic and talked about running backs and players in football, goes to the Jets, that becomes the second story in his own city. That's how big this Odell Beckham Jr. story is with the football Giants, yes?
Yeah, second story by a long shot, yes. I mean, and there's no offense to Le'Veon Bell. I mean, he's the guy the Jets targeted. He's set out a year. I mean, he's such a dynamic player, and he's a running back. But, look, Odell Beckham Jr. is a lightning rod. There's nobody like him in the league. I'm not saying he's the best player in the league, but there's nobody like him in the league. He just is a star in every way, shape, or form. And, you know, in last August, the Giants gave him a 5-year, $90 million contract, and now here they are trading him to the Browns. So a lot has happened. You know, some of it strange, some of it incredible, but he's going to be employed in Cleveland now, so that's why it's such a big story.
Well, you're saying, you know, you talk about the contract extension, and Giant GM Dave Gettleman is on record just a little while ago saying, I didn't sign this guy to trade him. Obviously, he did, but I think that everybody was so shocked last night. I mean, Bell going to the Jets, that's been rumored. It's been talked about. So that's part of the reason why it's not nearly the story of the size of Beckham, because I don't care who you are. There was nobody in this town, I mean nobody, that even entertained the idea yesterday that the Giants were trading Odell Beckham Jr.
Well, Sid, there was a lot of murmurs about this, right? There's been murmurs about Odell being traded. You know, I remember last year at the NFL owners meetings, you know, Odell's getting traded for the Rams. Odell's getting traded to the Rams. You know, he doesn't have a contract. He's getting traded to the Rams. And, you know, that was pretty much ado about nothing. But so yes, I was very surprised at this yesterday, but I wasn't totally shocked just because the Giants never put out this fire. You know, when Dave Gettleman said, I didn't sign him to trade him, I think he meant that. But what does that say, Sid? You know, that's like one of these coaches, college coaches, who say, I intend to be back at Mississippi next year. Well, that means you're gone because you intend to stay, but you know you're not. So, you know, he said, I didn't sign him to trade him, which I think was true, but he didn't say, I am not trading him. And they waited. They weren't shopping him per se, but they waited to see if they could get a really good offer. They felt they got a really good offer, and they pulled the trigger.
You know, talking to Giant fans and people like you, Paul, all day long, this is the second big New York name dealt over the last month. The Knickerbockers traded Porzingis to Dallas. That was a shocker the week of the Super Bowl. But all the Knick fan kept saying was he didn't want to be here. Well, every time I talk to a Giant fan today about this trade, they've said the same thing, dating back to the days, like you said, when he wanted to go to Los Angeles to play for the Rams, which is he didn't want to be here. Is that true or overstated?
I think it's overstated. You know, but the problem is, and one of the problems with Odell, you know, this was not one last straw that convinced the Giants, look, we have to trade this guy. It's just an accumulation of things. It's not he takes a lot of energy. Sid, Odell takes. You should know about that, right? A guy taking a lot of energy, right?
Well, listen. When they traded him, they go, you just can't trade a guy with that much talent, and that's why time and time again, Mark Chernoff keeps bringing me back.
It's exhausting to be around certain people. Believe me, I know that. How much longer we have on this, by the way? No, some people are just exhausting. Odell is exhausting, but he's a tremendous player. But, so when he goes on ESPN, last season with Lil Wayne, and they say, about the Giants, who just handed him a $90 million contract, and he can't say, I love it here, I want to be here. When they ask him about Eli Manning, he doesn't say, that's my quarterback, I ride or die with Eli Manning. So that frustrated the Giants. And so I don't think he wanted out, but he never 100% said, I'm all in. And there's a difference. It's subtle, but there's a difference.
You mentioned Eli Manning. I was watching, I forget the name of the show, my buddy Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman on ESPN this morning after the show with Bernie. You were on with us earlier. And Stephen A. Smith kind of made this remark that the Giants really chose Eli Manning over Odell Beckham Jr. And I've heard other people say that he's coming back again, another year with Eli. The Giants, they're so appreciative of what Eli did winning those 2 Super Bowls. They haven't cut this tie. It should have been cut a long time ago. So his contention is the Giants picked Eli Manning over Odell Beckham Jr. Any truth to that?
No, they don't play the same position. It's just a whole different. Eli Manning gets lumped into everything. Now, he's a big boy and he makes a lot of money and he's been around forever, so he can take it. But he gets lumped into, he makes too much money. They got to take money from him. The Giants haven't asked him to take a pay cut. People expect Eli to walk in the door and say, Mr. Mayer, Mr. Tisch, slash my salary. He's not doing that. If they come to him with something, which they're not going to, he might listen. So now he's being accused of, people say, well, it was either Eli or Odell. Eli is so above this stuff. He doesn't – look, Odell has 390 career receptions. Every one of them was thrown by the right hand and arm of Eli Manning. Every one of them, okay? All 44 touchdowns from Eli Manning. So there's a connection there. Eli is not celebrating today. It just wasn't one or the other. They're apples and oranges. The Giants think Eli Manning in 2019, whether you believe it or not, and you don't have to believe it. I'm not saying you do. They think he gives them their best option at quarterback this year, not next year. This year, and Odell is a whole different situation.
I totally agree. Sid Sports Sunday, a special edition of Sid Sports Sunday, brought to you by our friends at Ramsey Mazda. Paul Schwartz covers the Giants on a daily basis for the New York Post. Nobody knows more about the Giants than Paul. Odell Beckham Jr., I keep getting told by everybody around the team, including you, that he's very popular in the locker room. That for as much as the media bashes him, and they've got reasons why, he does a lot of stupid stuff, and the coaches and the owner, Mara, does stuff they wouldn't like, that to a man inside that locker room, much like Le'Veon Bell was, by the way, in Pittsburgh, the people here in New York really enjoyed being his teammate. Can you confirm that?
Yes. This will not be a popular move in the Giants locker room. Okay, first of all, players respect talent. He's got the goods, and Odell has got the goods. There's no question about that. So, players were in awe of his talent at times. So, he was not a selfish guy or a selfish teammate. I think he's self-absorbed as a person. I really think, and that contributed to some of his issues, but he's not selfish. He was good with the receivers, all of them. He wasn't just like, let me hang with Victor Cruz and Sterling Shepard. He hung with all of them. When he was hurt last year, he played cards every day, laying on the floor with Jonathan Stewart, a veteran running back who was on IR, who Odell did not have to befriend. Odell can be seen at anybody's locker talking to anybody. I know John Jalapeno, the center who got hurt, he suffered a similar fractured ankle. Odell would check on him every once in a while. So, no, this is not a move that, let's get this guy out of the locker room. He's causing problems. He didn't cause problems in the locker room.
Let's talk about the deal, though. A lot of people very upset with Dave Gettleman. They're like, this guy has no idea what he's doing. And I've read other sports reporters in town say that they were warned by people in Carolina about Dave Gettleman, that he's just reckless. Landon Collins goes to Washington. He deals Olivier Vernon. They've lost 4 or 5 other guys. Now he deals Odell, and they're not thrilled with what the Giants got in return, a late third-round choice. the kid Peppers at safety, and a first-rounder. How about 2 first-rounders? How about a second-rounder? How about the early third-round pick, which Cleveland still has today? So the guy really getting taken to task this morning from the critics is Dave Gettleman.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but it's fair. Look, Dave Gettleman is not, he has not won several championships, and he can just sit back. He's not Bill Belichick, who can sit back and say, look, just trust me. I know what I'm doing. I can sign guys, not sign guys. Dave Gettleman does not have that kind of track record. I mean, he was with the Panthers for 4 years. They made it to a Super Bowl, and then they went downhill pretty quickly. And yes, Dave Gettleman really rubbed a lot of the veterans in Carolina the wrong way. Guys like Josh Norman, D'Angelo Williams can't stand the guy. I'm sure Landon Collins is not going to have great things to say about him now, or even Odell Beckham. As far as what they got back in the trade, well, first of all, Sid, I think people in my line of thinking thought, look, you got to get 2 first-round picks back for Odell, or else you don't make the deal. Now they got 1 first-round pick, which was the 17th pick. Good pick, not a great pick. And, you can count Jabril Peppers as a first-round pick. He was a first-round pick 2 years ago. He's 23 years old. He is a cheaper and definitely more versatile safety than Landon Collins. Maybe not better right now, but more versatile. And you get him for 3 years on the cheap as opposed to paying Landon Collins a lot of money. So you can say that he was another first-round pick. I mean, he was a first-round pick 2 years ago. The third-round pick, I would have preferred it to be a second-round pick or the higher of Cleveland's 2 third-round picks. But look, Antonio Brown got back a third and a fifth-round draft pick, and that was just pathetic return on the investment for the Steelers. And so, Mari Cooper did not get back nearly to the Raiders what the Cowboys gave them compared to this deal. So this was probably the best deal they could get. But, Sid, I was told if this deal didn't come together, and the Giants pushed for Jabril Peppers. If Jabril Peppers was not in this deal, they wouldn't have made the deal, the Giants. And if they didn't, they would have walked away, and Odell would have been back on the team.
You brought up Eli Manning earlier, and Giant fans are all freaked out about what's coming next. The Giant brass has alluded to the Giants, resolving that issue. The next quarterback for the Giants, I think most Giant fans think, will be on this 2019 roster. Now they've got 2 picks of the first 17 in the draft. We know the names, the kid Haskins at Ohio State. Today, Kyler Murray has his pro football workout day at Oklahoma. The Giants are there. So do you think now that the Giants will do something in the first round to address Eli's the next quarterback for the football Giants?
Well, I don't think because they traded Odell, now they have to go get the quarterback, but they certainly have more draft manpower. They have more draft collateral here. They have 2 first-round picks. They have a second-round pick. Now they have, a third-round pick. They did not even have a third-round pick before this. Now it's the last pick in the third round, but it is a third-round pick. Here's what I think, Sid. I don't think the Giants can open the gates next year and have Eli Manning, Alex Tanney, and Kyle Lauletta as their 3 quarterbacks. I just don't think they can do it. I just don't. They can't sell that. And I'm not saying they have to take a quarterback with the number 6 pick. If you ask me right now, I don't think they will. But I do think they will add a quarterback, maybe at 17. Maybe they go for Drew Lock from Missouri. I think they like him a little bit. I don't think they trade up to get Dwayne Haskins because I don't think he's that kind of prospect you trade up for him. And you mentioned Josh Rosen. I think he's a very interesting scenario involved there. I would give up a second-round pick for him. I would try to only give up a third-round pick. The Giants did not have a consensus last year that they loved any of the quarterbacks, Rosen, Darnold, Mayfield, Josh Allen. But I think they liked Josh Rosen enough. Now, they didn't like him enough to pick any of the quarterbacks at number 2 last year. But giving up a second-round or a third-round pick for the guy, now you got an interesting situation where he can sit and learn behind Eli, play when he needs to, and you haven't invested a ton in Rosen, whereas if you don't think he's the answer down the road, you just replace him with somebody else.
Let's close shop with this. Jet fans now are talking about really pushing the Patriots and being a legitimate playoff contender. They added Mosley. They added Le'Veon Bell. Giants are subtracting. Landon Collins goes to Washington. Olivier Vernon and Beckham Jr. both go to Cleveland. Now, look. Still have Eli Manning if he's got something left. You got Barkley, now the most dynamic running back in football. Shepard is a talented wide receiver. Ingram is a talented tight end. So for Giant fans that are saying the Giants are tanking here, they are starting a complete rebuild, that they may be one of the worst teams. Max Kellerman said maybe the worst team in football. Do you think that's a bit, again, overstated?
I do. I don't think they're the worst team in football. This is not the start of a rebuild. The rebuild started when Dave Gettleman walked in the door. I mean, he cut guys left and right. Now, just because they didn't cut Eli and they, kept an older quarterback, people say, well, they're in win-now mode. Gettleman never thought they were in win-now mode. He was trying to win. He inherited a team that won 3 games. You think if you put a lie detector test up to Dave Gettleman last year, he would have said, I can go from 3 to 10 with this team. He didn't think that was going to happen. He purged the roster. He's doing it again this year. Jerry Reese left him a salary cap nightmare and a awful roster. There's no draft picks from the previous years on this team anymore. That should be the guts of this roster.
So you think that the Giants, between Dave Gettleman, GM, and Pat Shurmur, second-year head coach, they've got the right guys in place to go through this and again, at some point sooner than later, become a team to be reckoned with?
I think it's too soon to tell, Sid. I mean, I don't have any problem with those guys, but Pat Shurmur has had 2 losing seasons with the Browns and 1 losing season with the Giants. Gettleman took over a team and they went 5-11. There are reasons for all this and all this failure, but I think these guys can get it done. I think they're reputable guys, but look, they have to put together a defense that's credible, which they do not have right now. They got still work to be done in free agency. They have all these draft picks. They got to get busy doing some hard work here before I will endorse either of them as being on the right path.
No question. Listen, as always, Paul, you're terrific. You're great. I love you. Thank you so much for hopping on both Bernie and Sid in the morning and this special Sid Sports Sunday podcast. Keep up the great work. We'll talk again real soon, pal. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Sid. Take care.
You got it. Okay, so that's going to do it here. We gave you a really, really detailed, in-depth look at both teams, the Bell acquisition as well as others with the Jets, with Meta from the New York Daily News, the Beckham trade, as well as other moves by the football giants with Paul Schwartz of the New York Post. Again, free agency is today. Folks, we still have the draft coming up in a couple of weeks, more free agent moves. So I don't believe the Jets and or the Giants are nearly done. There is going to be a lot more moves for both of these football teams before we hit training camp in late July of 2019. But if you enjoy the Hot Stove League in baseball and you were looking forward to free agency in football and you live here in New York City and are fans of the Jets or Giants or both, you could not have had a better start and a more exciting day than today here in the NFL world. So with that said, don't forget, tune in to Sid Sports Sunday every Sunday morning at 9 a.m., 9 to 11, here on 77 WABC, brought to you by our good friends at Ramsey Mazda. And, of course, stay up to date with all the moves around the NFL on our morning show, Bernie and Sid, in the morning, 6 to 10 a.m. weekdays, also here on 77 WABC. So with Jet fans and Giant fans and NFL fans in general, we hope you enjoyed this special Sid Sports Sunday podcast. We'll talk to you again real soon. Peace. Sit up!